So,
Working in construction, driving my 57 Chevy hot rod.
how did you start hunting?
Well,
How did you get into hunting? What was that? Friends, family, your own kind of thing? How did that?
so my dad, your grandpa, never. He took me hunting one time. He had an old friend named Gary Feeser. And Gary said, let's go hunting. And he took me with him. I think I was probably, I don't know if I was living with him when that happened. I think I might have been, but I don't know that for sure. So I don't know if I was 12 or 14. I moved in with him at 14. But we went up to Mount Ord, which, you know where Mount Ord is, and at that time it's just thicker than dog's hair on, in Manzanita and stuff. I think Gary had a pair of binoculars. We did not have any binoculars. I think my dad had a gun. He had to have had a gun. What he was, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And I just remember Gary being down the canyon or whatever and getting our attention, or maybe he was across the canyon and he was pointing, and with the naked eye across the canyon we saw a deer, and it was a doe, and that was it. I mean, we never saw a buck, and that was just for the day, and it was the only time I got taken hunting by my dad. But
Did that trip do anything to set in motion, like when I can or down the road, I want to try this and try to be better at it? Or was it just like, yeah, I went one day with my dad, and then later on something happened that kind of got you in?
well, I think it was, I went one day with my dad. I saw a deer. I could barely see it, with the naked eye. My brother Terry had a Crossman pellet gun, and you could put 177 pellets in it, or you could put BBs in it, and you'd pump it up. And I got a hold of that, and I would go into the orange orchards that were not too far from our house, and kind of have mixed feelings about this as I think about it, because all the years we've been hunting, we don't hunt to just kill something. But when I was 14 and 15, I would just go in those orchards, and it was a place to get away from everybody and see if I could shoot something. And so I would shoot birds, doves, sparrows, whatever. And so that became a challenge. It's open sights, pumping and trying to shoot something, and of course I didn't eat them. I didn't do anything with them, But that, I think, created this. It was. I guess you would call it a competition, or a skill, or I don't know what. It awakened something up in me that this is challenging. This is very challenging, and to see if I could. And I didn't give a whole lot of thought, unfortunately, to the fact that I was taking a bird's life. There could be all kinds of explanations for that. I mean, and still got divorced parents, and still, I've never went to any counseling. I don't know if it was a way to take frustrations out or whatever.
Sure.
I don't know, but it's something that I did, and I think that's something that stirred in me. And then before my senior year, when I was 16, I had a good friend of ours that was the second house over from us, Mike Bradshaw, that he had a young family, but he was getting into hunting. And my brother Terry also had a compound bow. Interesting enough, his last name was Carroll, and out of Moab, Utah, there was Carroll's Archery. And that may or may not be a name that people would recognize, but they were at the forefront. One of the leaders in the industry of archery out of Moab, Utah, they were the first, or some of the first ones, to make an aluminum riser and bolt some limbs on it. Anyway, he had a compound bow that they made because his last name was Carroll. He got it for free, and it was a nice compound bow or whatever. And my neighbor was going to go javelina hunting, and he said, "You want to go?" And I said, "Sure." And I didn't even know what a javelina was or what it looked like or whatever. He says, "Oh, it's a pig, you know, or whatever." So I had this vision in my mind, and anyway, I brought that recurve bow, and I had practiced shooting boxes out in the backyard, and we went. Never saw a javelina, but somebody in the group that we went with did, and a guy shot one with his bow, and I have not seen one since. It was red. Most pigs are salt and pepper kind of color. This pig was as red could be.
Yeah, when they're babies, they're red. They're red.
This was,
And you'll even hear people call them reds, or
Yeah.
reds when they're babies.
and you know what? It may have been a sub-adult. It may have been in between a baby and an adult, but I just remember how red it was, and I thought, wow. And it was being commented on. Wow, this is an unusual color. He's still red or whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I got to see what a pig was, out of the group or whatever. And so that was kind of part of it as well. I met a gal, and her sister had married a guy that was into hunting and reloading bullets and stuff. And so it kind of just took off from there.
So when you think about those early years when you actually first started getting, where you were thinking about hunting, preparing to go, like, hey, I don't even know. Was it a draw system back then as well? Like early 20s, whatever age you were, as you got into like, hey, I'm gonna big game hunt. I'm gonna hunt whatever, deer, elk, archery, not archery. Like, how'd you kind of?
I was 21.
Start getting into that.
And they did have a draw system back then. So however long ago that was, probably, it was 78. It was 1978. And myself and a couple of friends put in for a rifle deer in Unit 27, which is over in the eastern part of the state, and it's high elevation, pine trees and stuff. Didn't know a whole lot about it, just really didn't. By then I was married, I had a little girl, and I had a four-wheel drive truck, and we went on that hunt, and I shot my first deer. I had bought a 7 mag, and I had worked up a load for it. And so I was 22 then. Yeah, in 78 I was 22 then when deer season came around. And I shot a nice, I say nice, I mean he was a 4-point muley buck. Probably had about a 24-inch spread, but pretty spindly and no mass or anything. But he was a decent 4-point, and it was my first deer. And I think I got pictures of that somewhere. I'm gonna have to find them. That was a long time ago. Yeah.
With that success on that hunt, was that just kind of fuel to the fire? Like, hey, this was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I had got this 7 mag, and I'd worked up a load so that if I had to take a 200 or 300 yard shot, you got to remember back in 1978, there are no rangefinders. Maybe the military had them and it was top secret equipment. I don't know, but
The hunting community.
The hunting community did not have rangefinders, and so you're looking with your eye trying to judge what does 100 yards look like, or 200 or 300 or whatever. For heaven forbid 300, that is just an outrageous shot. You really have no business taking that shot. And I shot that deer at 27 yards.
With a 7 mag.
With a 7 mag. He had no chance.
Do you remember what scope you had on that rifle?
I'll bet it was a Tasco.
Tasco 3 to 9?
Could have been. It could have been a 4-power for all I know.
Just a fixed 4-power?
It might have been a 4-power, or it might have been a 3 to 9.
Tasco.
Tasco, yeah, would be my guess. In fact, I'm almost positive.
Yeah.
Because I never bought a Redfield or a what would be the other one? It's been around forever.
Was Burris around?
Weaver's Redfield, no, Burris, maybe Burris around, but I didn't know anything about him. I'm trying to think of the other one, but basically there were 3 kinds of scopes back then, as I remember.
The major companies.
Yeah. And I just can't remember the name of that other company that's been around.
You remember if that was a mule deer tag, or was it any other deer tag?
It was a mule deer tag. It was a mule deer tag. Yeah.
So, yeah, kind of tell us, how'd you get into then hunting Coues deer?
Well, actually, I didn't even know there was 2 different kinds of deer in Arizona, and I finally heard about them. And you know, believe it or not, or accept it or whatever, if you hunt muley, you know, the joke is they stand right there and let you shoot them, or you scare them and they pogo out there 100 yards and stop and turn broadside and say, shoot me, you know, or whatever. That was my experience. We literally came up on that deer. It looked up at us and was standing there looking at us, and I thought, holy cow. And then it put its head back down and started eating again, and I thought, they're just dumb, you know. But then on the contrary, you hear about the what we call the whitetail deer, Coues deer, which the proper pronunciation is cows, but nobody calls them cows deer. That just doesn't sound cool. But it was a Dr. Cows who did all the research and studying on those deer down in the southern part of the state of Arizona. But anyway, you hear about Coues deer, and I just heard they're just so smart and they're hard to find, and you know, you better have binoculars or you're not going to have any success. And so it just sounded like way more of a challenge to hunt them. They're a lot smaller deer. They live in different country. Rougher country, so I kind of got intrigued with that. And also there was always probably 4,000 to 6,000 Coues deer tags left over after every hunt, so you could go hunting. You had to get drawn, but not enough people were hunting those deer in those days.
So there was always the opportunity.
There was always an opportunity, and you could just, if you didn't get drawn for muley, you could just put in and then eventually over the counter. And it got to the point where literally we would just put in for those units down there in the south, get a Coues deer tag, and then there would be, you know, the word got out, and after a while there'd only be like 3,000 left or whatever. And only so many people would send in and then there'd still be 2,000 left, and then it became first come first serve over the counter, and you could get two
deer tags.
2 deer tags, yeah. And so that kind of accelerated it, you know, because now you're hunting for 2 deer. And
so how many times did you do that where you had 2 deer tags? Handful of times.
I will bet that it was at least 4 or 5 times. At least 4
kind of
or 5
like
times.
This period of time, 4 or 5 times in a row, you know, years in a row, where you would get
years
drawn,
in a row,
and then you would also go for the same unit, buy an over-the-counter tag.
Yeah.
Tell us one of those stories where you filled both of those tags. How was that?
Well, when I really got hooked on those deer was, you know, you'd go down there and you'd find a spike or whatever, and back in those days, you kids were coming along. My sweet wife was more than patient with scouting trips and, you know, going out to shoot, or, you know, and going hunting and so on. And I remember a friend of mine, I was getting a friend of mine into hunting, and he had a brand new Bronco, and we went down south, and and I had a 22-250, which I was concerned about because I was thinking, man, I hope this will knock a deer down. But these Coues deer, a monster Coues deer might weigh 125 pounds, you
Right.
know. And I remember we came over this ridge, and he goes, hey, there's some deer right there. And still didn't have binoculars at that time. Couldn't afford them, if, you know, whatever. And so I sit down and I wrap my arm in my sling and I get my elbows on my knees while he's standing there shooting at it. He goes, there's a buck. And so he's shooting at it. Well, you know, offhand shooting is very tough position to be in, and you have to be dang good or lucky, one or the other, you know. And of course he couldn't hit that deer. And so, you know, in my position, I'm steady, I've got my elbows on my knees, wrap my arm in my sling, I'm pulling that tight, and he shoots and I squeeze it off and drop that deer. And it was, I think it scored about 75. But it was a beautiful little three-point rack, you know, with eye guards. He wasn't happy with me. Chad didn't like that. And I said,
You had your
hey,
chance.
what, you know, you got first shot, you know, or whatever. And he doesn't hold that against me or anything, but, and you know, he's got 4 boys, and I had 4 boys, and they've gone off and hunted, and they've killed some monster Coues deer over the year.
What's their last name?
Carling.
Yeah, so that's the Carlings.
That's the Carlings. Yeah.
Some people listening might know the Carlings. Yeah, they definitely know what they're doing.
Yeah. They've killed some big deer, and we have too, you know, over the years. But yeah, so then I went down there one year and got two tags, and I had my father-in-law's old homemade wooden pack frame that he had made, and borrowed that, and I was just kind of hiking around in the hills and came over a hill, and here were 2 spike Coues deer bucks, and I just pulled up and shot both of them. I had 2 tags, I shot both of them, and then they both hit the ground, and I thought, well, that's stupid. I gotta carry both of them out. I was a ways away from camp. But I cut them all up, and I'm guessing that was probably a 60 to 80 pound pack, probably. 60 to 70 pound pack.
All your stuff, 2 deer.
Probably 80 pounds, 2 deer, and I carried them out at the same time. and I thought, yeah, I'm not going to do that again. And I wasn't into trophy hunting at the time. I look back at that now and I think, holy cow, you had 4 or 5 years where you had 2 tags. You could have been, but it just wasn't into that at that time. You know, it was literally food, you know, some meat for the family and stuff. So but yeah, those were interesting times, interesting days.
Besides all the stuff that you were doing on your own, learning and hunting and scouting and reloading and all that stuff, was there somebody back then, I don't know, a public figure or not, or somebody that, or videos or magazines or something that you would be like, okay, this is how I'm gonna progress my my hunting game to be more successful, or to find bigger bucks, or to, as far as how do I do things, or hey, I need to get binoculars, I need to get a rangefinder, I need to get, oh, I have this scope on my gun, but it would be better if I had this scope on my gun, or just kind of that transition. Was there any public influence, I would say specifically in Arizona and kind of in even the Coues deer hunting space, of like, okay, if I do what this guy does, I watch his videos, or I've read his articles in such and such a magazine, or I've heard guys talk about it at the local gun store, and if I do that, that's going to help me, whatever? Or were you just kind of trial and error on your own, kind of figuring stuff out?
Kind of trial and error on my own. You got to remember, in those days there were no videos.
Yeah,
I mean,
right
there
now,
were magazine articles, you
right.
know.
So we have now, right? YouTube, internet, hunting forums, podcasts, all this stuff that we can just gobs of information that we can soak up. So yeah, I just didn't know back then, as far as, was there any of that? Oh, I read this article.
So I would get the hunting magazines and I'd read articles and stuff, but I wanted to get into archery, and this brother-in-law that I actually married that girl that I met at 16, whose sister had married a guy that was into shooting and hunting and stuff, and so we became brother-in-laws. And we would talk, and we were talking about getting into archery. And so Jennings was making bows, and they came out with this new contraption called a compound bow. And I can't even tell you. We'd have to Google it, or we'd have to do something to find out the model I had. But it was the bottom of the line. It was the cheapest Jennings compound bow you could get. Not much more than a recurve with wheels on the end, on each end. I mean, you know. And I had 5 kids and working in construction. There wasn't a whole lot of leftover money, and but I got a hold of one of those. I might have paid $50 for it, but my brother-in-law was doing way better than me, and so he got a Jennings T-Star. I'll never forget that, and it was just a little bit above what I had. And we got some archery javelina tags. You know, by then I had shot quite a few, my share of javelina with a rifle or whatever, and they're just not much of a competition to do that. So we were going to get into archery, and so we did that, and that was an amazing hunt. We glassed up this herd of pigs. We didn't know how many was in the herd at the time. We just glassed up a few pigs and kind of were 50 yards apart, and kind of was just going up the ridge. And I'll make the story short, but I hear him shoot, and I hear a pig squealing. So I thought, oh man, he got one, you know, or whatever. And then I turn and look, and literally 10 yards in front of me are 3 javelina. I didn't even see him until, and if you've hunted javelina, that can happen. You just, you know, and so, man, there I am, and I had not practiced a 10-yard shot. I'm just being right up front about it. I had a 20-yard pin and a 30-yard pin, and I had not practiced at 10 yards. I didn't know where to aim or whatever. And the adrenaline is, you know, you don't know it at the time, but it's flowing big time. I pull back and I shoot at this pig broadside at 10 yards, and I go right over its back. And they scatter. There's about 3 of them there. They scatter, and I lost my legs. My legs came out from underneath me. I mean, the adrenaline and that euphoria. I had never had that happen before.
Yeah.
Never. And I had no control.
Yeah.
I mean, my legs came out from underneath me, and I'm sitting on my rear end on the ground and I'm shaking. I'm shaking, and I'm going, what the heck? You know? And I get up on a knee and I'm kneeling down and I'm trying to get my composure and everything. And I kind of laugh. I'm kind of laughing like, what the heck's going on here, you know? And at the time, I didn't know. I mean, I didn't think about adrenaline or, you know, or any of that kind of stuff. Well, long story short, I spent the next, I think it was at least 45 minutes. There ended up being 25 javelina in this herd, which is a big herd, scattered across the top of this ridge and here and there, and, you know, 3 of them here, and, you know, over here 50 yards is another 2 or 3, you know, or whatever. And I'm missing shot after shot after shot. I only had 5 arrows. I've shot all of them. I don't have a javelina yet. And I see my brother, I lost sight of him, and I yell over to him, come over here and help me find some arrows. I'm out of arrows, you know, or whatever. I find 3 or 4 of my arrows. He goes, no, I'm still chasing one over here, you know, or whatever. And so we got quiet and quit. We weren't yelling at each other. I think we'd kind of gotten together and we're kind of chatting at a softly or whatever. But anyway, I've shot my arrows. I've found 3 of them. I shot 2 more of them, so now I've shot 7 shots. And I have 1 more arrow, and I look across a ravine, and there's 3 pigs on the side of the ravine, and there's this little, it's flat where I'm at, but then it kind of goes to the edge of the ravine, and there's just kind of a prominent shelf there, and I just thought, I'm not gonna try to sneak up or anything. I'm just gonna walk over to the end of that where I can't go any further, and if one of them's still standing there, I'm gonna see if I can hit it. And that's what I did, and 2 of them, they don't see very good. And I wasn't trying to sneak, or I just thought, this is it. I'm just going to walk over there.
Yeah.
And so I just walked over there. I was trying to be quiet, but I just walked over there. 2 of them took off, and one of them was just standing there, just kind of looking around, you know, and across the ravine. And I'm thinking, oh man, is that 30 yards? And I drew back and I let it fly, and I hit him right in the spine and dropped him. And his front, I mean, I don't mean to be too descriptive here, but he lost his rear end, and
Right.
and
Spine shot.
So he goes over the top, and that's when I get my brother-in-law's attention again, and I said, I got one, you know, he's not going to go very far. I got to go take care of this. And anyway, I find another arrow and go over the top, and he's down at the bottom of the next ravine over there, and he's not happy, and he's popping his teeth, and I went up and finished him off. But that got me into archery.
So that was your first archery.
That was my first archery kill. It just, and that javelina was a boar, and not knowing anything about it at the time, I have since then got a couple of javelina in the Arizona State Record book, and I should have boiled that skull and measured that pig, because it was a book pig.
Yeah.
But I didn't know it at the time.
Right.
You know. But
let's see here. We've talked about a lot of this. So you talked about glassing. You said you were glassing. So just kind of quickly hit on that. So at that point, I'm guessing you're hand holding binoculars, and you're just kind of smaller magnifications, or how did that kind of progression go for you?
You hear about, we started hearing about, man, you need to get binoculars, or whatever. And so I just had these cheap 7x35, I think is what it was, binoculars or whatever. I couldn't even tell you what brand they were, but I thought, okay, I'm going to save my money up. And we went, let me back up. You asked about, and that's why I told that story. I got into archery and I went down to the local
Yeah, like influence or
yeah, the local archery shop, and they were doing archery shoots down there, competitions and
Right.
stuff. And I went down there and I met a guy named Ron Buckner, and we hit it off and we became friends. And so I guess the person that I learned a lot from was him. He was really into it big time. By then he had killed I don't know how many javelina with a bow, killed deer with a bow. He was into guns and rifles and loading and all that kind of stuff. So we became friends. We started hunting together, and I learned a lot from him.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from him, and that was probably local influence wise the biggest. He wasn't trying to be a mentor, and I didn't look at him as a mentor. But I learned a lot from him.
yeah. Would you say if you heard something about trying to do this, or you should do this, or we need to try this on our next hunt, would you say most of the time that was Ron telling you, hey, I heard about this, or hey, we need to do this, or
Well, yeah, we would. He had a better job and didn't have any kids, so he had a lot more money than I did.
time and money?
And so But I remember us talking, and I remember thinking, man, I need to get some 10-power binoculars. And so I saved up my money and went down to Wide World of Maps.
Okay.
And bought these Swift 10 by 50, I think, binoculars.
Still have them.
Yeah, you're the one that has those?
Yep.
Yeah, I bought those binoculars. Oh my gosh, what a game changer. Man, what a game changer.
That's what Carson glasses with.
Yeah, and I just was amazed at how much more game we saw. And then to try to get a tripod, in the first you're just sitting on your rear end and with your knees on your elbows on your knees trying to hold them steady, and you could do that with some 10 powers but man, that was a game changer. That just really it just opened the door big time, and we saw way more game, started becoming way more successful. They call it hunting for a reason, and that tool made it a lot easier to find them.